All right, we got everything plugged in tonight. It's not like yesterday when we went live right after the game and nothing was plugged in and nothing was working and we weren't really set to go. We have it all plugged in and we have it all set to go tonight for this week's Panther-Lair Show. We did just talk not 24 hours ago. It's probably about 28 hours ago. We had a post-game show after Pitt's loss to Boston College in the ACC tournament. Figured we needed to talk after that one. I actually was planning, I kind of figured we would just do a post-game show after every ACC tournament game. If Pitt were to happen to beat Boston College, we would do one after their game against Wake Forest. I'm sure you saw that game today. Boston College ended up winning. Boston College was up by a significant amount. And then all of a sudden, Wake Forest came storming back. The Eagles survived and advanced. But anyway, we would have done post-game shows after any game Pitt played in the ACC tournament. That was the plan for this year, and maybe it'll be the plan next year if I remember it. But I figured, that was a post-game show. It was right after the game was over. I don't know if I would say emotions were high, but it's good to, take a little time. And I think you tend to have, if not different reactions, maybe a little more measured reactions, a little more perspective, I should say, on a situation when a little bit of time has passed. And so since our show is regularly scheduled for Wednesday nights at 8:30, I thought, well, this will actually work out. We'll do a Tuesday post-game show, and then we'll do our regular Wednesday night show. A little cooling off period. Nothing has really changed with Pitt basketball. Somebody asked that on the message boards. What could possibly have changed in 24 hours or 28 hours? Nothing has changed. The whole situation looks exactly as it did yesterday after the game. And I suspect it'll look the same tomorrow as well. But I still felt like, we would take a little time and gather and talk about it. And I think at this point, and I mean, the season is only 24 hours over for Pitt. It's only been over 28 hours or something like that it's been over for Pitt. So it's not like we're weeks into the offseason, but I don't have much more to say about what happened this season. There may come a point in a week or two, or maybe even a few days, where we go back and kind of recap the season, maybe try to recall what we were thinking at different points. But most of the season, got to be honest, is pretty fresh. I mean, most of the season is still pretty fresh and pretty memorable. I mean, you want to talk about the Citadel, you want to talk about UMBC, you want to talk about Monmouth, you want to talk about, King Rice and some of his comments. You remember that? The 1-point losses with Minnesota and Virginia, and then Notre Dame, beating St. John's. They did that this year. I'm just kind of looking at the schedule, and most of these memories are pretty fresh. That game at West Virginia was obviously a disaster, although I think it was overshadowed in the disaster department by the Citadel game. Ethiel Horton's arrest, Nike Sabandi's injury, Jamarius Burton's delayed involvement due to injury, Mogi's emergence, Onibuchi Izukudo goes on scholarship. There are a lot of storylines that I think maybe at some point we'll feel comfortable with recapping and looking back on. But right now, it seems like I'm ready to kind of close the book, on, at least for the time being, on that season, and think a little bit more about the future rather, sort of the immediate future. Not necessarily the future of the next 2 years or 3 years, but the future of the next, what's right now, March, so the next 8 months of what the future will hold. And really, most of what will happen in a lot shorter time frame than that. It'll be 6 months until the start of the semester. And by that point, you're going to have a roster set. You're going to know who's here. You're going to know who left. You're going to know who came back. You're going to know who joined the team. And that's, I think, where my interest is shifting right now. Now, first comment on the chat, on the live chat during the show here, was TRR said, I still have not cooled down. And this was posted before we even went live. So TRR jumped in right off the bat, said, I still have not cooled down. Capel needs fired by Friday at the earliest. I cannot fathom another season with this staff because it would be another wasted year. First of all, TRR, it's Capel needs to be fired by Friday. Just let's get it. Let's use the proper English on that, right? Let's use the grammar as we know it. But here's the thing, okay? I think at this point, to me, there's no productive conversation to be had sitting here saying, Capel should be fired, Capel should be fired, Capel should be fired, Capel should be fired. Just sort of pouting it over and over again. Okay, I've told you what I think about the situation. I've told you what I think is going to happen in the situation. And to be honest, I've been pretty consistent about it dating back to probably January. Or whenever they had the 3-game winning streak, but before that they lost 4 in a row. When they had the loss at Boston College was bad. They got crushed by Wake Forest. They had those 2 awful Virginia Tech games. And even at that point, and that was, early February. And I think you could go back into January when they got destroyed by Clemson. I said, listen, here's what the situation is. This is how I see it. This is how everyone that I've talked to has told me. This is what it looks to be with Jeff Capel. That it's not likely that he's not going to get bought out because it just doesn't make sense for Pitt to do it. And I've been consistent about that all the way through. And there's nothing I've heard leading up to the ACC tournament. There's nothing I've heard since yesterday's game that changes my thought on that. Anything could happen. Something completely surprising could come out. But every person I've talked to have said, if that happens, it would be a shock. Okay? And so, with that in mind, when I kind of go, as I decide what, how to proceed with this show or what we write on Panther-Lair.com or what we talk about, I just kind of feel like the should he or shouldn't he be fired conversation gets pushed to the wayside or gets pushed to the side because it doesn't seem like it's going to happen. And so if that's the case, and if Capel's coming back next season, then we got to talk about what he needs to do this offseason. There was an interesting thread on the message boards. Somebody posted of, what could Capel do to get you back on board? And there are a lot of different answers. Ran the spectrum. A lot of people said nothing. A lot of people had different ideas and different suggestions. I recommend checking that out on our premium basketball board, the center court of the Pitt board, because it was an interesting conversation about how people could possibly get back on board with Jeff Capel, even temporarily. The things that could be done this offseason. And so that's kind of what I'm thinking about right now. The things that can happen this offseason, the things that need to happen this offseason, and where the focus really needs to be for Capel and for his staff and for this program as it moves into the offseason before what is, truly a pivotal year. A critical season for Jeff Capel and the state of Pitt basketball. So we're going to talk about that tonight. We're going to talk about this offseason for Pitt, what it will bring and what it should bring and what it needs to bring for Pitt. And then we'll get into some football stuff as well. I want to talk about spring football. Panthers are off this week for spring break, but I think there's some topics to cover there as we kind of move into things. And, of course, we'll take your comments here on the live stream at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. If you're listening to the podcast later in the week and you say, I had a comment, I had a question, why didn't I ask it? Or why didn't, well, tune in. Every Wednesday night at 8:30, you go to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, and you can post in the chat, and we'll have a conversation. We'll go back and forth. We'll talk about Pitt sports, your comments and questions. If you want to make sure whether you want to make sure you get your comment responded to, you want to get your question answered, you could be a super chatter, throw a couple bucks to us. You click that little $sign at the bottom. We appreciate your support very much for getting supporting us on the podcast, and we'll definitely make sure we get to your comment and or your question. Of course, in the meantime, you can go Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. It's the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet, football, basketball, and recruiting. You can find it all at Panther-Lair.com. And, of course, we have message boards where you can interact with hundreds and thousands of your closest Pitt fan friends. Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. I want to start off, and this is an interesting question. I'm going to research it as we go. RJC Man 38 is a super chatter. He's got a bunch of posts in there, but he says he had a question here. Any other Power 5 programs with 0 recruits that we can compare? And my guess is no, but I'm going to look through it real quick while we talk here. And I'm starting at the Big 12. Nobody has 0 commitments for the 2022 class. Oklahoma State, Kansas State, and TCU, with your old friend Jamie Dixon, they all have 1 commitment each. So 1 as opposed to 0. Flipping over to the Pac-12. You've got Arizona, Oregon State, and Washington with 1 each, but nobody has 0. my guess is that none of these Power 5 schools are going to have 0 commitments right now. But in the Big Ten, Northwestern and Wisconsin have 1 each. And let's flip down to the SEC. SEC, I do not see anyone with 0 commitments. Texas A&M has 1. And I'm pretty sure there's nobody in the ACC with 0 commitments, but let's look real quick just to make sure. Oh, you know what? I don't think I'm looking at the right thing because I'm going to have to do a little extra research on this because they have a few schools that are not listed in the ACC team rankings on Rivals. Let me just check real quick. Yeah, I think we have a few things we have to fix with our team ranking system there. But the short answer is no. I don't think any other schools in the conference are sitting here without any commitments. I'm going to check one other here as we just kind of answer this question. I mean, no. Everybody else. Oh, Georgia Tech. According to Rivals, Georgia Tech doesn't have any commitments in the 2022 recruiting class. So there's one you can at least consider. Thanks. Brock Madonic just jumped in there and says Georgia Tech has 0 recruits in the class of 2022. So Pitt's not the only one. They're not even the only one in the ACC. So you got that. Here's the thing, okay? And I think this is a perfect launching pad into the conversation about the offseason and the additions that need to be made. We're going to keep talking about recruits in the 2022 class. Somebody else asked, who was it? Was it Brock? Said, have you heard anything on the latest with 2022 recruits? Adu Thero and Noah Batchelor. Here's the thing, all right? There are very few guys that are available right now in the 2022 recruiting class, seniors in high school, that you're going to be able to get who can come in and help you win games in the ACC next year. I think more likely than not, the guys you're going to find in the 2022 recruiting class right now are going to be of the Nate Santos variety. Unless you find that diamond in the rough, that gem, or you get a guy to reclassify, but then you're dealing with somebody who's younger. And, if you reclassify from the 2023 class back to 22, you're dealing with someone who's younger, and we've seen what growing pains can look like when you try and play at this level when you're younger than everyone else. It's just not likely. This team's success next year in terms of roster additions is going to be based on what they can do in the transfer portal. And I think we're getting to a point where we don't just automatically write that off and say, oh, geez, great. If you rely on transfers, you're screwed. Well, there was a time when that was the case. That's not the case anymore. And we've talked about this before, about the value in going after transfers, about what transfers can provide for you, and just the sheer volume of the transfer portal right now. There are so many transfers that are going to be available this year that you're going to be able to find guys. And we've talked about this so much with football, with transferring quarterbacks, that you don't need to reach on a high school quarterback just so you can say you took one every year. Because if you have a gap, if you end up with a space in your roster, if you end up with a year where you're going to lose a 4-year starter and you've got a pretty good roster coming back and you think there's a chance to capitalize on the guys you're returning, but you don't necessarily have a guy on your roster that you feel great about, there's probably going to be a good option in the transfer portal. That sounds familiar, right? And I think that's even the case. I think that's especially the case in basketball too. And you can see programs across the country where transfers have excelled and played well. I think Mogi played well as a transfer. I think Jamarius Burton played well as a transfer. I think Ethiel Horton and Nike Sabandi have the potential to play well as transfers. And I think it's just going to keep growing. There are going to be lots of guys available in the transfer portal. And you don't want to build your entire roster out of transfers. But to get a few pieces to fill out your roster, get a few pieces to fill some key holes that you have, and you can really go a long way in pushing yourself forward. We often talk about how basketball programs and teams can be turned around kind of quickly. 1 or 2 key guys can really turn things around. And I think nowadays, in 2022, you can find those 1 or 2 key guys in the transfer portal. And so, would have been nice to have Jalen Hood-Schifino or Judah Mintz in this recruiting class coming in as freshmen next year for everybody to be excited about. Yeah, that would be great. You don't have that, though. And you're not going to get that. What you can get is guys who fill the needs that you have out of the transfer portal. And those would be guys that are older, that are more mature, that are more physically mature, that have played the game, that understand what it takes to play the game at the college level, that understand what it takes to grind day in, day out, night in, night out, what it requires. I mean, I can't, numerous times at the beginning of the season, before the season even started, guys like Ethiel Horton, before he got arrested, and some of the younger players on the team talked about Jamarius Burton. And we've got him right there on the screen. It's perfect that he came up just there. And they talked about the influence that he had been, how he came in and he had an understanding of what it takes to play high major basketball. And he tried to impart that on the rest of the team. Even a guy like Mo Gee didn't really have that experience because he played at Stony Brook, but he knows what it's like to go through a college basketball season. And so you get these guys who come in and are ready to play, more ready to play than the guys you're going to get out of the guys that you're going to be able to recruit out of high school. And so, I mean, there's upside. And for a team that needs to turn things around quick and win a lot more than they did, instead of going 11-21, they need to go 21-11 next year. Getting guys who are physically mature, who have played high major basketball or even mid-major basketball, and that might be the place to look when you find those guys at the mid-major level who do a couple things really well that you happen to have need for on your roster. But you can find those guys, and they can help engineer a quick turnaround. A quick turnaround is possible. I mean, to be frank, Jeff Capel did it in year one. Going from Kevin Stallings last year to what Capel accomplished in his first year, even if it wasn't a great season, it was still a hell of a lot better than what came a year before. What was their record in 18-19? They went 14-19. And they won 3 games in the ACC. Now, that's not great. Significantly better than 0-18 in the conference. And 1 or 2 key guys, particularly more, older guys like you would get out of the transfer portal, can help engineer that kind of turnaround. Here's the thing, and he's on the screen right now. The number one priority for Pitt this offseason, the most important thing Jeff Capel needs to do this offseason, before we start talking about transfers or high school recruits or this position or that position, they have to get John Hughley back. This team needs John Hughley next season. I think he was their best player this season, even if he wasn't great consistently game 1 through 32. He was their best player this season. When they were at their best, he was playing well. When they had their best chances to win games, it was because he was playing well. And for them to have their best chances to win games next year, it needs to be centered around him. He needs to be the anchor of the team, the foundation of the team. And they need him back. And there's been a lot of talk about what Hughley might do. I'm of the mind, and this is just sort of my opinion with only sort of vague info backing it up. It's just kind of my opinion. I don't think Pitt's in too much danger of losing John Hughley to a transfer. I think there's a bigger concern about him leaving for the NBA. And I don't know how realistic that is. I don't know if he's going to do it. I'm sure he's considering it. I think most guys consider it. And certainly I've got my opinions about whether he should or shouldn't, but I'm not an NBA scout, I think if he plays college basketball next year, he'll be playing at Pitt. That's my opinion. If he's not at Pitt, I think he'll be trying to make a go at the NBA. So that's where it makes it kind of tricky. You don't want to, if you're the coach, you can't push too hard on stay here, don't go to the NBA. You want your guys to go to the NBA. You want your guys to have that opportunity. You want to believe in your guys. You want to support your guys. But they need John Hughley back. They need him on this team. And other schools are going to sniff around. Other schools are going to try and get him to transfer. Jeff Capel has to make sure that doesn't happen. You can't push too hard to get a guy to skip the NBA, but you can push really hard to make sure he doesn't transfer somewhere else. And like I said, I don't think he's going to transfer anywhere else, but other schools are going to try. That is guaranteed. Because why wouldn't they? You want to play for an 11-win team? Best player? Do you want to be the best player on an 11-win team? That's what they're going to be saying to him. So Jeff Capel has to make sure that doesn't happen. If he goes to the NBA, it's a decision he made. Just like Justin Champagnie made the decision, it happens. You can't have him transfer anywhere, though. And so that's the priority number one. You got to get him back. You got to make sure he doesn't transfer. And then priority number two, I say this because this has been my standard, Pitt top priority in the offseason edition for a while now. And so I'm sticking with it, but I'm close to flip-flopping number 2 and number 3 here. But number 2, I'm going to stick with it and say they need a power forward. I mean, they absolutely do need a power forward. They don't have any other power forwards. Dan Oladapo, who, when was the last time he even played? Did he play? He might have played in the Duke game. I forget if he got on the court then. I've got the notes from the Duke game. List each player. Let me see if I can find when Oladapo played prior to the Duke game. Here he is. Virginia Tech. The home game against Virginia Tech. February 5th. And he played 39 seconds. He played 39 seconds. He hasn't played double-digit minutes since the Virginia game on January 19th, and was pretty much not a factor. And he's got a year of eligibility left. He can come back next season. He presumably could transfer if he were so inclined, even though he already transferred once. If he's a graduate, I think he can transfer somewhere else and play right away if he's so inclined. But they need a power forward out of the transfer portal. They need somebody who can come in and play. I don't know if you're going to get another Mo Gee, because I don't know if there is another Mo Gee. I know there is someone else named Mohamedou Gee, but you know what I'm saying. I don't know if there's another Mo Gee out there to find, the guy with that kind of wingspan who can block shots and occasionally hit threes. But you need a power forward who can come in and help you with rebounding and play tough defense and generally make life uncomfortable in the paint and inside the arc. And also, it would be nice if he could defend out to the three-point line every now and then. That's top priority for me. When you look at what Pitt needs out of the transfer portal, I think that's a top priority. You've got to find a power forward. Now, the number 3 priority this offseason, and this has grown on me. They need a guard out of the transfer portal. Somebody who has experience as a point guard would be ideal. I still don't know how this team would operate if the offense really incorporates a true point guard or not, and maybe it would change to incorporate one if they actually had one. But they need another guard, and maybe this is just PTSD from watching the game yesterday. But I mean, they have one good guard in that game, and that was Jamarius Burton, and he was just okay in the game. They need another guard. They need another experienced guard. In addition to Nike Sabandy, you're going to bring back Nike Sabandy. You're going to bring back Ethiel Horton. You're going to bring back Jamarius Burton. Those 3 I'm almost 100% confident on. I don't know what Femi Odikale is going to do. But he has not played well for a while. He's been struggling. I think he's been hurt, but he's been struggling. You need another guard who can come in here and play. And I don't know if Nike is that guy. He can help them. I think they're better with him than without him. But they need another guard who can come in and play. And if he's a true point guard, all the better. I think those are the priorities. And you're starting off with 2 scholarship spots. The Mo Gee spot is going to be open. And I think Onibuchi Izukudo is going too, since he walked on senior day. So you would think that those two are going to be your open scholarship spots to start with. I would have to think you're going to get 2 more guys who decide to transfer. And you're going to have 4 spots to work with, which would end up being kind of what I've said all along, that I thought this offseason would see them add 2 or 3 transfers and 1 high school guy. I think they will end up finding a high school guy, someone late in the process, kind of like they found Nate Santos. Maybe somebody who's got a unique skill set, like Santos is a shooter, maybe like it's a shot blocker or something like that. But I think they'll find somebody late in the process and bring him in. But the priority is going to be the transfers. And those are the guys that are going to impact things the most next year, is transfers, whatever you can find. And I think they got to fill those specific positions. Power forward and guard. if you can find a shooter, if you can find somebody who can come in and really be a threat from outside, that would be great. You are bringing back Ethiel Horton. And you are bringing back, ideally you're bringing back Nate Santos. He's a freshman who averaged not a lot of minutes in this season in his first year. So, who knows what he's thinking right now. But if you bring back Horton and Santos, you've got a couple guys who can shoot. I think bringing in another experienced shooter would be a good thing if you've got the scholarship space. If they end up with 5 open scholarships, I think getting a power forward, getting a guard, actually even if with 4 open scholarships, getting a power forward, a guard, a shooter, and a high school kid, that would be a good way to fill out this roster and give you the opportunity to maybe build an effective roster and maybe have a little more success this season. Or this coming season. But I think those have to be the priorities. If you're bringing Jeff Capel back, I think that's where he's going to have to focus. And I'm sure that's where he is focused. And then there's one other thing. And, if you've listened to this podcast before, if you've read Panther-Lair.com before, if you've read the message boards or we've interacted or radio or anything like that, I don't like to fire guys. I don't like to go out of my way to say this guy should lose his job. These are real people we're talking about, their livelihood, their jobs, their careers, their professions. I don't like to say somebody should be fired. If somebody's not doing a good job, I'll call it out. I'll say it. I'll be honest. This is not working. This guy's not doing a good job. This guy's area is struggling. But I don't like saying guys should lose their jobs. And so I'm not going to say anyone should lose their jobs. I'm not going to say anyone specifically. But I think the reality is, I think Jeff Capel has to shake up this staff, even if he feels like it's just for show. And that may go against his integrity. That may go against, how he wants to operate. He may sit back and say, no, I believe in my staff. I don't want to fire someone so I can say I fired someone. And I admire that, and I appreciate that. I admire loyalty. I respect loyalty. But the reality is, when you come out of 4 years and you're putting up an 11-win season, and you get beat by the last 5 games they lost by a combined total of 101 points, and the last 4 seasons have been what they were, with all the issues that some were and some weren't, to blame on the coaching staff. I think you have to make a change. I think you have to look at the staff. I think you have to look at staff responsibilities. And I think you have to figure out where things didn't work. And even if it's only one. I hate to, I would hate to be sitting in a room with Jason Capel and Tim O'Toole and Milan Brown and say, one of you guys got to go. And I'm sure Jeff Capel doesn't want to have that conversation either. But, and I'm very much not about, trying to do things to appease the mob if you don't feel like those are the things that really need to be done to help you win. But the mob's pretty loud right now. And the mob's pretty upset. And even more, I shouldn't even say the mob's loud. The mob is starting to just go away. Not care. And how many extra season tickets you're going to sell if you fire one of these guys? None. Nobody's going to see you fire one of your assistant coaches and say, "All right, man, you got me back. All right, I'm buying season tickets. I'm back on board. H2P, baby." That's not going to happen. But I think as sort of an outward show of recognizing that things are not working with the program in its current state and its current setup and its current approach, I hate to say you need a sacrificial lamb, but I think you got to do it. And I don't know enough about anybody's job responsibilities to say who should or shouldn't be let go. I don't know about that. I just think Capel he needs to make a move as an outward sign of him trying to salvage what's left of this program right now. Now, knowing Jeff Capel, as I think we've come to know him, he doesn't strike me as the type who would say, well, I think things are working. No, not that. He doesn't strike me as the type to say, look, I think we've got a good staff in place. I think these guys are good. I think these guys are good at their jobs. I think there's a lot of reasons we haven't been winning games, but these guys are not the problem. But fans are pretty upset right now, so I'm going to fire one of them. Just to create an outward sign of what I'm trying to do to turn the program around. I don't necessarily see Jeff Capel saying that. I don't see Jeff Capel firing anyone unless he believes that they deserve to be fired. But I think from the outside perspective, outside perception, probably needs to be done. All right, let me jump into comments and questions here. We got a lot rolling in. You guys are busy on the chat, and I appreciate it. Eric Rogers says, Chris, I know the buyout is $15 million or so, but we have to pay Capel $5 million to lame duck coach plus his $5 million buyout, so why not cut loose now? Well, Eric, I mean, I don't think your numbers are entirely right. I think the buyout now is closer to 17. I think the buyout next year is more than 5. I don't think he gets paid $5 million a year. And again, Eric, I mean, this is paying money to paying a guy to not coach and paying a lot of money to a guy to not coach. I'm not. I think it's hard to justify at this point. Josh Newark says, is the basketball program now at the same level of Stallings last year, Dixon's last year, or somewhere in between? And how much have we improved 4 years removed from Stallings? I mean, the record is better than it was in Stallings last year. They won 8 games that year and went 0-18 in the ACC. Pitt won 11 games this year and won 6 in the ACC. That's of little solace, I realize. I think what it is, so I mean, if you take this year in a vacuum is better than Kevin Stallings' second year. But this year didn't happen in a vacuum. This wasn't the year after Stallings left. This was Jeff Capel's 4th year with 4 years of roster building, and it still, fell to the level it's at. So, relatively speaking, straight apples to apples comparison, this season was better than Stallings last year. Relatively speaking, and with the context of coaching tenures and all those things put into it, this might have been worse. I mean, when you consider that it's year 4 now. And I wrote this on Panther-Lair.com today. There's an alternate timeline here where in this season, year 4, Pitt rolls out a starting 5 that's Xavier Johnson and Trey McGowan's and Justin Champagnie at the 3 and Mogi and John Hughley. All right, that's your starting 5, and you've got Audice Toney and you've got Ethiel Horton and you've got Nike Sabandi coming off the bench. In addition to maybe like Will Jeffress, Noah Collier, those kind of guys, maybe Femi Odikale, right? There's an alternate timeline where that exists, and while that team still wouldn't be a great shooting team, I think you'd have plus athleticism in the backcourt. And you'd have a front court, forwards of Champagnie, Gee, and Hughley that could dominate. I mean, dominate with those 3 guys in the front court. And, I don't know if that alternate timeline team is winning the conference. But they're winning more than 6 games in the conference. They're winning more than 11 games overall. I'm pretty sure about that. And that's, but that's one of those things that, okay, yeah, you're right. You ran into some bad luck. You ran into some bad situations, some bad circumstances, and Capel even alluded to it yesterday that, Xavier Johnson and Audice Toney and, Trey McGowan's transfers because he doesn't want to play with Xavier Johnson anymore. He wants to be the man. Johnson and Toney transfer because Justin Champagnie's getting too much attention. Champagnie goes to the NBA. That's all, that's all bad luck. It's bad luck to have all those things happen and kind of gut your roster or gut what you were building. They were actually building something over the course of time here, and just one bad circumstance after another just gutted it, and that's too bad. That's bad luck. But it's not just bad luck. And when you're the head coach, the wins and the losses are what count, not the luck. They're not going to say Jeff Capel is, whatever he is now, 56 and 60 something, 56 and 69 or 51 and 69 or whatever it is, overall record at Pitt. but he's had some really bad luck. He has, but ultimately you're judged on the wins and the losses. And you don't get a free pass, after 4 years when you're still only winning 11 games in a season, no matter what kind of luck you had to run into. So it's tough. Let's see here. Doug Wood says, not questioning whether Jeff Capel should or shouldn't be let go, but can you see him being able to bring any transfers or recruits with an impending firing the next year? It's going to be tougher. It'll help if you could at least get the athletic director or the director of athletics out there in front of a microphone saying Jeff Capel is going to be back. He's got our support. Now this is a real point of contention too, and this is something we've talked about on the message boards. Look, I can't speak for other media outlets in town, but I'm pretty sure they've done the same thing. We've requested an opportunity to speak with Heather Lyke a bunch of times. And, it's in the middle of the season. Maybe you understand why she doesn't want to talk in the middle of the season, but the season's over now. And I think Heather Lyke has to speak to the local media. Heather Lyke has to address the media and talk about this situation. And it doesn't, I don't think a prepared statement gets the job done. I think she needs to sit down in a room, take questions, and, it's over dramatic to say, but she needs to face the music a little bit. She needs to bite the bullet and sit down and take questions on this. And it shouldn't be, there are going to be some tough questions. There are going to be some challenging questions, some things that she probably would rather not have to discuss or questions she would rather not have to answer. But the reality is, all of us sitting here know what those questions would be. If I gave you 20 minutes, you could probably come up with 10 questions that the local media would likely ask Heather Lyke if she were to sit down with us tomorrow. I know, I can think of 10 questions right off the top of my head that we would ask. And some of them are pretty tough. Some of them are questions that I'm sure she would rather not have to even answer or deal with her face. But those questions are going to come. And so if we set up something with Heather Lyke for Friday or next Monday or next Wednesday or something like that, there's plenty of time to prepare and figure out how you want to answer these questions, what you want to say, what, face you want to put on this thing. There aren't going to be any gotcha moments or anything like that. No, there's not really going to be any surprises. But what's coming. And I think the athletic director, the director of athletics has to address these things. Has to talk about them publicly. I don't think a release statement, a press release is good enough. I think you've got to answer questions. And here's the other thing. At some point in the very near future, Pat Narduzzi is going to get a contract extension. When that happens, they're going to have a press conference. So if you're Heather Lyke, you have to ask yourself, okay, I got two options here. I can do a press conference where these guys ask me all these basketball questions, and I can just sort of face the music on it and have a crappy morning, but deal with it and just be done with it, and get it out of the way. Or I can put that off and keep delaying it and keep dodging it and keep not doing it. And then when we have the press conference for Pat Narduzzi's contract extension, whenever that comes, and then I'm going to get a bunch of basketball questions then. Now you tell me which one's a more ideal scenario. Getting it done and out of the way, or sitting there trying to talk about how you just gave Pat Narduzzi another 5 years or something and getting asked about Jeff Capel's buyout. This isn't tough to figure out. But if they put it off, if they keep not getting it done with the basketball, with a press conference where we can ask about basketball, then those questions are going to be asked. Sitting in the South Side in the Pitt football team meeting room with Pat Narduzzi sitting next to her, she's going to have to answer questions about whether or not she wants to fire Jeff Capel. It's just, the director of athletics, at some point, you have to answer for it. And, that's just the reality of the situation. Let's see, we had a super chatter here jump in. Joe News says, Does Kiev fall before Pat Narduzzi extension? The Pitt administration is so slow. I'm not sure what the holdup is with the Narduzzi extension. I'm not sure why it's not done yet. I thought there was a possibility it would get done in December. Some people were talking that it could get done before the bowl game. I thought, when it didn't get done before, I kind of thought it would be after the bowl game, but shortly after the bowl game. It still didn't happen in January. It didn't happen in February. Now here we are in March. Pat Narduzzi said the assistant coaches were taken care of, so that's good. That's sort of settled. You don't have any issues there, but you need to take, Narduzzi needs to get an extension. Or to say it in Pittsburghese, Narduzzi needs extended. And I don't know why it hasn't happened yet. This should be the top priority. In addition to sitting down with Jeff Capel and saying, all right, Jeff, here we are. 4 seasons. We've seen what they are. Didn't go so hot. What can we do for you? What can we do to give you the best chance to succeed? What do you need that you don't have? What is missing right now from this program? And I think there are probably Pitt fans who hear me say that and they're like, are you kidding? Ask Jeff Capel what he needs? Give him more? What are you, nuts? But here's the thing. If you're Heather Lyke, I think you sit down with Jeff Capel and say, what do you need to turn this program around? What are you missing? What don't you have that you need? What is it? Tell us. Tell us how we can support you and give you the best chance to win. And you do that, and then, you probably don't give him everything he would ask for, but you give him as much as you can of what he needs. And then if you get to next year at this time, and the results haven't improved, you say, Jeff, we sat down here a year ago, and I asked you what you need. I said, what do you need from us to turn this program around? What do you not have that you need to have? And we gave you a lot, and it still didn't get better. I think you give him every chance to fix it. You give him as much support as you can. And then if it still doesn't get fixed, you make the moves that you make. All right, let's scroll down into TRR says those bigwig Pitt boosters allegedly in the suite with Heather Lyke yesterday are going to come through with the money to buy out Jeff Capel. I just don't believe Pitt has that kind of support. I don't think they have the boosters with the means or the desire to pay $17 million to get a coach to go away. Just don't believe it. Matt Swackhammer says, have you heard anything regarding staff changes, if Jeff Capel is returning, or are they stuck with the staff due to possible lame duck status? I haven't heard anything either way. I don't know what Jeff Capel is going to do. Like I said, I think you hate to have a sacrificial lamb, but I think he probably needs to have one here. Let's see. Royce Beacom says, have you seen Pitt talking to a point guard? I don't see someone picking it up since Odekale's demise. It's they need to find another guard. I'll say that. What I can't figure out with this offense, it's got this whole positionless, basketball thing where everybody moves around and who was the point guard on this team this year? Sometimes it's Odekale bringing the ball up, Horton brings the ball up, Burton brings the ball up, Iziakudo brings the ball up, and then it just starts getting passed around, and eventually somebody takes a bad shot, or if they're smart, they get it inside to Hughley. That's sort of the offense, and I don't know if you need a point guard to run that. I think if you have a point guard, maybe you can run more plays and run more sort of set action. Ethio Horton, I talked about this yesterday, only shooting 2 3-pointers yesterday, only attempting 2. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. I don't. You need to run plays to make that happen. Maybe you need a point guard to run the plays. I don't know, but I think you're right. I think they're going to need to bring in another guard. Cotton2123 says Washington State also has 0 recruits at the moment. Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah. What I was looking at on Rivals, it wasn't telling me the information I wanted to find right now. You know, as far as who has commitments and who doesn't. It seems like Pitt's not the only Power 5 school that doesn't have any commitments for 2022, but, they're one of a few. Glovebox23 says, outside of a great opportunity to get playing time due to the roster not being great, what is the sell for transfers to come to this team and staff? What is the sell? I mean, playing time, like you said, playing in the ACC, playing against Duke and Carolina and all the programs that you're going to face in the ACC. I think they've made a lot of facilities improvements. I think they continue to make facilities improvements. And I think you look for guys. I mean, obviously, if you can get Power 5 transfers, that'd be great. But I think you look for guys like a Mogi, or, no matter what you want to say about his contributions, and Ethiel Horton. Guys who are playing at a lower level, mid-major level, who want to have an opportunity at a high-major conference. And that's what I think you look for. That's the selling point. To get guys to come here. It's an opportunity for exposure. It's an opportunity to play against the best. It's an opportunity to play at the highest level. And so I think that's part of the sell. Now, everybody else in the ACC can sell that too, so you got to be really good at selling it. But I think, what's the sell? I think that's the sell. It's interesting. Doug Woods, you have an interesting question. Says, do you know what even this team is supposed to be? Dixon had a tough, gritty team and brought in players to develop. It was defense and rebounding. What style is Capel even trying to put in? I think this year, honestly, Doug, I think they wanted to be like those old Pitt teams. I really do. I think that's who they wanted to be, and that's what they wanted to be. I think they felt like bringing in Jamarius Burton as a tough, physical, mature guard. I think they felt like that was a big piece. I think they felt like Dan Oladapo could bring some of that. Even if he wasn't going to be a great player, he could, or a guy who would get 35 minutes a night, he could go in and bang and beat guys up down low and be physical. They wanted to be that kind of team this year. They wanted to be built on defense and rebounding, drag them into the muck, pull guys down, pull the other team into the mud, right? Isn't that what Jeff Capel said so many times? They wanted to be that kind of team, that kind of physical team that just grinds it out. But the players never could seem to really commit to it. They could never really commit to it. And it almost makes you wonder if, is it even possible to build a team that way anymore? Can you get guys, I hate to say it, kids these days, to commit to that style of play? I'm not sure, but they didn't do it this year. They couldn't get those guys to commit to it this year. Brock Madonic says, Chris, what were your initial thoughts when Jeff Capel stated he needs better players? Could that quote lead to some players heading out? I mean, look, the first reaction is on its surface. You look at the quote, we need better players. It's true. It's true. Yeah, they did need better players. Yesterday, they had 3 good players. 3. And those guys weren't even all that great, But they were probably the 3 best players all season, and everybody else was either not very good or not consistent enough to be considered good. They do need better players. Now, I don't think Jeff Capel was saying that he doesn't have some culpability in that, and I think that's where a lot of people got upset. I think that's, they felt like Capel was sort of trying to absolve himself of blame by saying we need better players, like blaming it all on the players. And I don't think that's what he was doing. I don't think that's what he was saying. I think he'd be the first to tell you that he's responsible for putting the roster together, that he's the one who assembled the roster. And they don't have better players for a lot of reasons. I mean, I talked about that alternate timeline roster, a little bit ago of if you had Xavier Johnson on this team, you had Audis Toney and, Trey McGowens and Justin Champagnie. They tried to build, but they lost the best players. And so I think that's, that was my reaction to it. Could the quote lead to some players heading out? Honestly, Brock, I don't think so. I think playing time, contributions, the role that some guys have, the roles that guys have, those things will lead to guys heading out more than Jeff Capel's quote after that game. Let's see here. Scrolling through for a few more questions. I did want to talk football a little bit. A couple of people asking about Xavier Johnson and Audis Toney, why they left. I think there was a feeling. Jeff Capel talked about jealousy and infighting. Hey, those were the words he used yesterday. I read it. Craig Meyer wrote it in the Post-Gazette. He talked about jealousy and infighting. And I think I think Justin Champagnie was getting a whole lot of attention. Justin Champagnie was getting a whole lot of attention, whereas Xavier Johnson and Audis Toney had been getting that attention. And I kind of think that was probably had a lot to do with it. All right. RJC Man 38 says spring football quarterback, and you're right. I said we were going to not just talk about basketball this whole time. We were going to talk about football, and here we are with about 10 minutes left in this show, and we do have to. I want to talk about football just a little bit, just to switch up the topics, not to spend our entire time on basketball. You asked about quarterback. I'll start there. Went into the spring expecting Keaton Slovis to be the number one quarterback on this team. Didn't go into the spring expecting Pat Narduzzi to name a starter. Don't expect Pat Narduzzi to name a starter until August at the earliest, maybe mid-August, maybe late August. But still kind of expect Keaton Slovis to be the guy. Still expect Keaton Slovis to be the number one coming out of spring and, be clearly the best quarterback on the team. They've had 3 practices so far, and there's nothing I've heard that has changed my opinion or expectation on the situation of what's going to happen. I think Keaton Slovis was recruited to Pitt to be the starter. I think he came to Pitt to be the starter. I think the coaches looked at the roster they had coming back and said, all right, we've got a pretty good roster here. We need a quarterback. We like the guys we have on our roster, but we think we can do better. And they found Keaton Slovis and felt like they did better. They felt like he was maybe, the top quarterback in the portal. And I don't know if he was number 1, but he was no worse than, say, maybe 3. And so they felt like he could come in and be that missing piece, like fill that pretty big hole that's been left there and help get them back to where they were, last season. And so everything I've heard is that Slovis is the guy. The little bit we've been able to watch during, the first 3 practices where we watch guys throwing on air, right? Throwing wheel routes to running backs and throwing to tight ends and receivers, but no defenders or anything like that. He throws the ball really well. He's got a really nice throwing motion. The ball comes out, looks good, has good velocity. He looks the part. We'll see what he actually does, but that's my expectation is he'll be the guy. I wrote about this on Panther-Lair.com. When did that publish? Today, I guess. Yeah, I wrote about it today. And, generally speaking about the football team. And it's one of those sort of things, you can't, it's an intangible thing. You can't put your finger on it of what it is. But there's a feeling around this team. As I talk to people, but even more just as I watch them go through their business of practice, even just during the half-hour media viewing window, they've got higher goals this year. They've got higher goals. And it's interesting. I was thinking about it the other day as I was standing at practice and, watching drills and things like that. Got a lot of newcomers on this team. 7 freshmen who enrolled early in January, 3 transfers who came in January. And I was thinking about those guys. And I was thinking about what it's like when you join a team that went 8-5 last year, or 5-7, or even 7-7, or just just okay. 6-6, 6-7, 7-6, 8-5. Records in there. And you join a team like that, and that's one thing. When you join a team that went, 11-3, won the ACC, went to a New Year's Day Bowl, and, was down to their third quarterback, or else they would have beaten a top 10 team in a New Year's Day Bowl, or a New Year's Six Bowl, I should say, and probably ended up in the top 10 themselves. When you join that team, and they've got a bunch of guys back from that team that had all that success, I think it's got to be a different vibe. Like, you're walking into a group that knows how to win, has won, and is looking to do it again. And I think that puts a little something extra under you. I think that pushes you a little bit harder because you say, holy crap, these dudes are serious. I got to keep up. I got to work really hard if I'm going to keep up. And I think that applies to the newcomers, and I think it applies to most of the roster too. Guys who are like two deep guys or third team guys are looking and saying, we have something to live up to here. We have a standard to uphold. And these older guys who did it last year want to do it again, and they want to do even more. And we're going to have to work really hard to get them, to get where we want to be. But we've been there, we've seen it, and we know what it takes to get there and succeed. And there's just a different feeling around this team right now. Jared Wayne had a quote the other day about, good is not good enough. We had a good year last year, but good is not good enough. We want to take it all the way, and that's all I'm going to say about that. And I think it was that end part that, that's all I'm going to say about that. That just made me think that, these guys are thinking on a different level right now. And I think they're thinking on a different level, and I think they're carrying it into how they practice. That they know what they need to do to succeed like they succeeded last year and accomplish like they accomplished last year. They know what it's going to take. And I mean, they didn't know it. They didn't know these things last spring. But now they do. And they know what kind of preparation you need and what kind of dedication you need and what kind of focus and effort and energy you need if you want to really win at that level. And I think they've got that mindset down. I think they've really got that mentality down, and it's interesting to see. And you start getting kind of you start dreaming big, I guess. once those guys, when you start thinking about the levels that potentially are out there to be reached in 2022. You don't want to get too far ahead of yourself. You don't want to get crazy with it. But when you look at what they bring back, if Keaton Slovis can actually be good, I mean, they should be able to win a bunch of games. And they've got a schedule that should set up for them to should set up for them to win a bunch of games, but also win a bunch of games that carries over into some national prominence. I think that's on the table for Pitt this year. I really do. And I think the team thinks it's on the table as well. I didn't talk about home field when we got started here. I didn't talk about homefieldapparel.com. I've got the warm up the Victory Lights shirt on because I wore the vintage rock yesterday. So, I'm not going to wear the same shirt 2 days in a row. I did do laundry today, but I don't think I washed that shirt. Not going to wear the same shirt 2 days in a row. Got the warm up the Victory Lights. So I've got two of these sweet shirts from Home Field. I love them because, as I've told you a million times, they've got a great logo on them. I mean, you can see that. I apologize. I feel bad for the people who are only listening to the podcast that they don't get to see the sweet logos. But you're in luck if you go to homefieldapparel.com, look at their Pitt collection, you'll see it. It's a yellow shirt, says warm up the Victory Lights. It's a gray shirt that has a vintage rock on it. It says Pittsburgh Panthers. They're awesome. And they have a lot of great logos and designs for Pitt and a ton of other schools. And they put it on some of the highest quality t-shirts and sweatshirts that you're going to find. Soft. Keep their form. And they don't really lose it no matter how many times you wash it. It's my favorite shirts that I own. They're some of the most comfortable shirts that I own. I can't say enough good things about it. So go to homefieldapparel.com, get yourself some sweet Pitt gear. If we're going to talk all this big game about Pitt football in 2022, you're going to need some sweet Pitt shirts to wear, right? homefieldapparel.com. While you're watching the live stream or later on, whenever you're listening to it or whatever, make sure you click to subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. We would really appreciate that. You get a notification when we go live, so you know if we do a live stream, if there's some big news that comes out and we decide to go live out of nowhere, you will not miss it. Or if you forget on a Wednesday night, you'll get a notification, so you don't miss that either. youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. That's what I want to say about that. Get those subscribers up. We appreciate it. Can't thank you enough for that. And of course, go to Panther-Lair.com, Panther-Lair.com, the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet. Football, basketball, and recruiting. Thanks everybody who tuned in for the live chat tonight. It's been a lot of fun. Good times talking Pitt sports as always. We'll be back again next Wednesday night, as always, at 8:30 for another hour plus of Pitt sports talk. We'll have a lot of spring football talk, I think, next week, and basketball too, if anything comes up. So, and even if nothing comes up, I'm sure we'll find plenty to talk about. So thanks again. Really appreciate it. Make sure you stay on the message boards. We'll have lots of coverage for you there at Panther-Lair.com over the next few weeks and months and years, because that's what we do. Panther-Lair.com. Thanks again. Really appreciate it. Have a great rest of the night. Have a great rest of the week. Enjoy your weekend. We'll talk to you next Wednesday night at 8:30.